Check, check. Hello, hello. All right. If anybody can hear me, I see there's a couple people in the chat already. Just if you could just say yeah, or put a thumbs up or something in there, I'd appreciate it. Hello, 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 hello. Can anybody hear me? What's up, Rick? All right, awesome. Just wanted to make sure. Okay, I'm going to send the link to Zaradar, and as soon as he joins, we will get started. So audio is good. Awesome. Appreciate it. So I'll be back with you in a minute or two. What is happening, everybody? Okay, yes, yes, yes. Richie's Plain Talk says yes. Golf practice music. And here is my friend, Mr. Tobias Anderson. What's up, man? Can you hear me yet?
Hello. Yeah, I can hear you.
There you are. Awesome.
How are you
Appreciate
doing?
it. Good. Well, a little earlier than we expected. You got me. I was ready for 3 o'clock, and then you said, "Let's go." So I said, "All right, let's go." Took me a minute to.
Yeah, no, I think maybe we just miscalculated the time zones. I said 19 CT, so that's half an hour ago my time. So I think
Is
maybe
it really? That's my
yeah.
fault.
So I think your conversion was 9 o'clock my time. So that's probably why.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking because right now it's like 1:39 p.m. Eastern time, and I was thinking we were doing this at like 3 o'clock. So I'm horrible with that conversion.
It's no problem. It's always just +6.
+6 for, yeah, but the thing is it's +6 for you, and it's +4 for somebody else, and it's, you know what I mean? So
Yeah, I know.
having to remember it all is killing me. What's happening? How you doing?
Well, not much, just chilling, enjoying my forced vacation and finalizing my employment process with Novo Nordisk. I've finally got the contract today after running through all the hoops. Sorry, I'm a little tired. After running through all the hoops of, I mean, procurement or hiring in IT and in Denmark in particular is very much subject to what's known as good governance. So the standing rule is that you can't hire anybody into your company on your own. You need to go through the HR process, which means that the way that people are hired today is basically that some random recruiter will reach out to you, have a screening meeting. Then they will literally ask you to apply for the job that they are recruiting you for. And then you go through like a number of follow-up sessions, like you have a meet the team session, and you have a meet the boss session, and you have a are you crazy or insane test session. And if you go through all those hoops, then you typically
You made it past all that.
yeah. But this is typical for me. I think this is also what the confusion with Confio is all about, because I'm very used to this process, right? I mean, this is how it's been working for me for years, is that nobody, gives you a job anymore. You have to apply for it, but they still reach out to you and say, hey, we'd like to offer you this job, but you still need to apply. So I think it's a way to combat like nepotism and stuff like that. Like in the old days in Denmark, one of our big problems around corruption was labeled coffee money, right? It's just a traditional bribing or doing favors for friends and family that, results in economic gains. And obviously that's not beneficial for a, well-balanced society. So yeah, I guess this is the way that companies try to help, push back on these things by simply just canonizing how it works. And then that's just how everybody has to do it.
Yeah, the same thing happens here, depending on the company. Some things have to be posted, they have to go through HR or whatever, but you have upper management talking to some people and being like, hey, we really want you for this job, so apply for it, but they got to go through the process. So I get it. What are you going to be doing with this new company?
Well, I mean, Novo Nordisk is a pretty well-established company that's been around for quite a while. For many years, they had a global patent on insulin for type 2 diabetes. I had the fortunate experience of working with them in the past as a consultant. So I know quite a bit about their business. And like any other business today, they are faced with the necessity to disrupt themselves and become more technology oriented. And as I've stated a few times before, I'm fairly competent at doing, these types of exercises where you have to take a traditional enterprise and move around its technical prioritizations and restaff teams and train teams to manage various technologies. I think one of the reasons why I had a relatively easy time onboarding Cosmos last year when we started compared to a lot of the other people that started at the same time as me is mainly because I'm used to this whole workflow of looking at the technology landscape, looking at an organization, looking at the people, trying to map the future technologies into the competencies, and then trying to enable the company to best leverage these new technologies to digitize their business processes, which is all really about. And that's what I've been doing at DFDS for many years. It's what I thought I was going to do at Bitcoin Swiss, but they didn't want to do it anyways. I was offered a job at Ørsted a few months back to do the same. They didn't want to pay the price I wanted, and now Novo did. So I'm basically just going out there to help them build an internal developer platform, is what we call it. But in general, it's really just an abstraction on an underlying suite of APIs that make difficult things easy for feature teams, right? So in the sense of our blockchain community, when I was working in the L1 team, our logical architecture was the LCD. This is the platform that the L2 teams, they see. The L2 teams are feature teams. They basically build features on top of the platform. And then what we do inside, the blockchain in the L1 is basically the implementation that enables the logical architecture that allows people to build platforms on top of our particular platform. And much in the same way, Novo Nordisk needs to do that because, being a heritage company with lots of contractual and regulatory burdens because of what they do, they need to integrate some of these baseline systems together and produce a platform where you have like a unified set of technologies that everybody can use to, manage the basic responsibilities that you have when you're building an API for somebody to consume, which is typically what we call, telemetry or monitoring, which means collecting logs and performance measurements and stuff like that. And then you have, a whole other set of tools around managing containers, which is absolutely essential now, which just typically boils down to Kubernetes. So I basically put these things together and then build an abstraction that fits into a customized taxonomy that typically is tailored to fit what you call the business capabilities of an enterprise that can vary from company to company. Some companies don't manage their own, sales process, for instance. They have other agents do that, so maybe they don't focus on digitizing that part. Maybe they focus more on the assembly line and so on. So that's my job. I'm a developer, been doing that for 25 years and building custom platforms to enable other developers to abstract the way complexity requires developers, right? So people like me, we get hired and we get paid an awful lot of money to help other developers have an easier time building stuff for businesses.
just for a second, everybody that's in the chat or that's listening, thank you for coming. Welcome. I know that this was a little short notice. And Rick, yeah, I see you. Richie, Golf, Lucio, Happy Caddy is here in the chat. Gevic, thank you all for being here, and feel free to, if you have any questions, go ahead and throw them in. I can't guarantee that I'm going to get to them all because I've got some of my own, but yeah, I mean, that sounds awesome, man. It sounds like it's right up your alley and the kind of things that you like to do, right? You know, you told me that you're not really starting this job right away, though. You got a little bit of time before you actually jump into it.
Yeah, I mean, full disclosure, I was already considering this job back in Q1. So when I initially started the dialogue with Novo, I think it was back in April, I made it very clear to them. No, sorry, April, what I'm saying about it. Back in February, I made it very clear to them that I had these obligations to this community that I was, you know, helping. And I wanted to make sure that there was a smooth transition of responsibilities, so I could basically make sure that people like Vin and Till were comfortable just managing the day-to-day business without me. And thus I could, you know, go and do something else, because I mean, being the only part or only full-time employee in the L1 team is not really very fun. You spend most of your days sitting around on your own at random time intervals, typically intervals that were totally disconnected from my normal day cycle. People would pop out of the woodworks and ask some questions once in a while, and on any given day, nobody might ask any questions at all. So it was basically pretty lonely gig with some satellites flying around. And, you know, as we've talked about before, there's not a lot of development in the L1 per se. It's not like we're writing miles of code every day, which is really what I like to do. So I think, you know, after having reasoned about the path to parity and so on, and having, you know, somewhat done, you know, most of the work in Q1 that needed, being Q2 mainly being like a, you know, deployment exercise, I figured that maybe, you know, just doing the Q2, getting all of that done, and then shifting on to this Novo thing and working more as a sort of, I don't know, part-time consultant for the blockchain would be a better fit for me. But for better or worse, you know, that didn't occur. We didn't get the funding for Q2 that I wanted. I'm not going to work for the current funding because, quite frankly, it's not worth it. And I think also there's the whole problem of how do we incentivize talent if we're not paying fair wages and all of that. But I'm not really going to get into a long debate about that.
Yeah.
What I'm simply just saying is that I made a Q2 budget that I was comfortable with. We put it up, it didn't get voted in, and then that was kind of that, right? We still produced most of the work, and I still feel comfortable letting Vin and Till just sort of finish whatever we did in Q2. I know LBA was very concerned about, you know, getting credit for finishing stuff, but that was never really my thing. I don't really care about getting credit for anything. We have a lot of people in this community who all want to get credited for all sorts of stuff, but what is it even worth, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we all know individually what we've done, and the good and the bad things that we do will hopefully outweigh each other, so we can, you know, have a peaceful life. And that's sort of what I'm, you know, aiming at. And I think I did a lot of good in the last 12 months. And now I'm, you know, looking forward to doing something else. And, you know, I'll still be an investor, I'll still be around. But by and large, I think, you know, that my initial assumption that the community can't afford me is clearly true. And I also think that I'm not interested in, you know, sitting around every 3 months negotiating my worth compared to a bunch of amateurs who can't even fucking dox themselves. So by and large, you know, it's probably, you know, I think I did a lot of nice stuff, and I think people are at a place now where, you know, maybe granted that I pitch in here and there once in a while if need be, you know, they can manage the chain on their own, and I can, you know, find a place to work where I can have, you know, real physical colleagues that I can engage with every day, and, you know, maybe write more code than I typically would do in the L1 team due to the nature of the work. And also maybe, you know, engage more with real world business problems rather than, I don't know, fictional make-believe storytelling bullshit.
Aren't you going to be bored with this new job with no one on Twitter to argue with and no one talking shit all day?
Well, I mean, I think you have to remember that I only joined Twitter fairly recently, and I think the only reason why I spend so much energy on Twitter is because I'm of the belief that in the current world that we live in, it is not the truth that gets to decide. It's basically the loudest voice that gets to decide.
Yeah,
And that means that if you want the truth to shine through, you have to become the loudest voice. That's why I'm on Twitter, right? It's to basically be the loudest voice and expose misinformation and combat misinformation, because I mean there's a shit ton of it out there every day, because by and large, you know, our community in particular is probably one of the first fully, let's call it semi-professional blockchain setups, and that has, you know, pros and cons, I guess.
yeah. One of the when I kind of announced that I would be chatting with you today, I was getting the same DM over and over again. Is Zarda coming back? Is Zarda coming back?
Oh, Zarda's not coming back.
Yeah, no, I wanted to let you speak on that yourself. I didn't say one way or the other, but you know, it sounds pretty clear that you know, you're very happy with what you're going to. This is obviously something that you've been looking at for a while, and it's come to fruition for you, so that's good. But you know,
I think if I can elaborate a bit, just
sure.
not to make it so binary, because that's gonna birth a whole new generation of FUD. I never left. I just quit my job, right? Or I didn't even quit my job. I was terminated, and then I refused to renegotiate under the same conditions. That is technically what happened, right?
Yeah.
And the second I got terminated, I had to basically let go of all responsibility that isn't the normal responsibility of any investor in this sort of internet bank that we're trying to build up. So by and large, you know, that was very nice, actually. The whole detoxing the last few weeks has been, you know, a great thing. I still think, you know, I've had a few meetings with LBA over the last few days. I'm probably still gonna make some sort of arrangement in the interim time until I begin, where I might, you know, wrap up some stuff, because the fact of the matter is that I did quite a lot of the different things at the end, because Superman was busy with other stuff, so I had to wrap up his release stuff for TFL. I also had to wrap up the Oracle. Still not sure if Ed ever got the testing done that he promised me, and so on. So there's a lot of stuff that I'm obviously well positioned to finalize. And, you know, I've just told LBA that, granted that I do not really have an interest in working as a full-time or part-time anything on a fixed thing, the better solution is for him to maybe make an agreement with me where I'm just paid an hourly wage, right? So it's basically straight up standard consultancy. And if there are a number of tasks that he feels needs to be handled by me, you know, over the next 5 weeks, I would probably say yes, if we can agree on the estimate and the fee for that. I don't know if he would have to run another vote to do that. That's not really my business anymore. So overall, I think that is the extent to which I will be doing, you know, stuff in and around the community until I begin my new job. And then when I start my new job, I will obviously get, you know, consumed in that for a while. But I mean, I still have my own ideas that I want to pursue within the blockchain space. And I think I've been very clear on that from the beginning. I just think that I have, for reasons, been part of building up a few standalone institutions in the community now. Let's call them Terra Rebels and the L1 team. And I think I've come to realize that, our budget is not very great. So I have to go back to funding myself again, like I did for the last 9 months. That will obviously, or the first 9 months, that will obviously cut into how much I can do. But then I will probably start engaging on different ventures of my own related to different ideas that I have around, Cosmos and blockchains in general. But that will be more of a hobby thing, right? Just to keep track with the technology and have fun and engage with the technicians. So that would probably be my sort of level of commitment looking forward, because I'm still very interested in finishing my Terra operator and building a PSP gateway for Kubernetes for my digital twin ideas that I've been researching for years before that, and so on, right? All of what I'm doing is just like one long journey towards a very specific goal, of which blockchain is a small part, but it's a very well-defined part, right? And I think that is also the problem that I see right now with the community in terms of its adolescence and its knowledgeability about blockchain in general, is that we're still so young as a community that maybe some of my ambitions are simply just too ambitious for where we are right now. We still have people wanting to increase the max contract size because they somehow believe that our blockchain is a general purpose database that we should just stuff everything into, not knowing that at some point it's going to run into its 5 terabyte limit, and then everybody's going to shit themselves and nobody's going to know what to do. Right?
I asked Steve about that when I saw it come up, and I asked him, could that create any kind of problem at all? And he told me
it could definitely create a problem.
He told me no, it wouldn't create any problem. And I'm like, okay. All right,
Well, Steve is not a technician, so he wouldn't know, and he's definitely a good good politician. I would argue that it doesn't present a terminal problem, but there will be some congestion issues, right? I've had some talks with some of the one of the Juno devs about this, and also I've read it on some of the older Cosmos issues when I did some research in the past, that there is definitely some sort of upper boundary right now, somewhere around 5 terabytes, and we're still a ways off from that. But when our database hits that number, we might start running into some problems. And I'm not sure anybody really knows how these problems will manifest, because they will manifest over time in various ways, which is what I like to call emergent behavior, right? It's simply what happens in distributed systems when you tweak certain things the wrong way. It's kind of like, think of it this way. On a hot summer day in Europe, it's like, what, 30 something degrees, right? On a hot summer day in the US, it's probably a bit higher, but somewhat the same. We all know right now, due to the whole dialogue about climate change and all that, I'm not going to go into the religious aspect of it, but we all kind of know that if the temperature goes up by 2%, everything gets kind of fucked, right? Yep. So think of the contract size the same way. Every time you tweak these things that affect your database, you might run into a setting that just kind of breaks everything. Maybe not right away. Maybe it's great for the first 6 or 12 months, but then all of a sudden it gets clogged up and you can't unclog it, and what to do, So this is why I think in general, this idea of using, your database for everything, this is what we call the golden hammer. it's a junior thing. A lot of junior developers suffer from this when they try out new technologies. They're like, oh, I just tried this new thing today called React Native. And tomorrow I'm going to redo everything I ever did into React Native because this golden hammer is better than everything. And then at some point, they're going to realize that there is no golden hammer. There's not this one thing that can do everything perfectly, because if there were, there wouldn't be hundreds of programming languages and tons of different operating systems and so on, right? Then everybody would just be using one programming language, one operating system, boom, fine. So this is the reality of things. And then this is what the Cosmos is all about in general. It's about tweaking this general purpose architecture that made up the first chain to figure out, what breaks. And when things break, you reverse course and you figure out how to unbreak it. And then you take another few steps forward, right? So I think, overall, it'll probably be harmless, but I think people need to be fairly careful about using the blockchain as a general purpose database. It will not end up with a positive outcome.
All right. Just so I'm not ignoring the chat, and we're probably quite a ways away from what you were talking about at this point, Happy. There's like a crazy delay when you go from Zoom to YouTube. So Happy posted, basically he said, I have to disagree. I'm sorry that I'm just getting to it now, but if you could elaborate on what it was that you disagreed about, because of the delay,
I don't
it might have been
pull him into the talk. Isn't that easier?
I mean, I can do that in a minute, but I got a couple of things that I wanted to chat with you about first. Lulian also says hello to everybody, and he mentioned this to me before. Zarada, he says maybe we will do a collaboration, Zarada. I guess now that you're free and clear and
I can do anything I want. I'm free as a bird. And just to answer.
Yeah. So he mentioned to me that he's interested in maybe collaborating with with you on something in the future.
That sounds cool, but let's take that in another context. Just to answer Happy's question with a comment, or comment with another comment. The reason why we cannot import and export Genesises is because we put too much shit into a single key value store for a single module, right? So we have to understand that there is a way to fuck up our database, and just dumping shit tons of data into it is a surefire way of doom to do that.
Yeah, but Happy put that comment in long before we even started talking about that. That's what I'm talking about, the delay.
Okay.
So I'm not sure what it was he was disagreeing about, but it was something that actually was before that. And Hugo, thank you very much. Hugo is wishing me a happy birthday. Some people know that today is actually my birthday. So
great. Happy birthday, mate. I didn't
No, there's nothing happy about it at this point. After
a while.
Then
I guess you're like me. I don't celebrate my birthdays either.
No.
It's like, who gives a fuck? I'm just getting older.
It's just a reminder of, how little black there is left here and there, and how much more gray is taking over,
Yeah.
But I do appreciate it.
And it becomes particularly depressing when you can't invert the numbers, right? So when you turn like 45, which I'll do in a few years, it's like, if I invert the numbers, it's like 54. So yeah, that won't work, right?
I don't want to. If I inverted my numbers today, I would be retiring.
Yeah, well, we'll probably get around to that one day.
So Happy's clarifying. He says it was in reference to being the loudest person in the room on Twitter. Okay.
No, I'm sure I'm not the loudest person in the room on Twitter. The person who is that has some sort of semi-neural network with some AI stuff running and a ton of avatars talking to themselves.
Yeah. Happy's definitely not the loudest person on Twitter. He's never on Twitter. I never see him there, really.
I think, for me, if you look across it broadly, there are different types of loudmouths. Some people want to be heard because they have good intentions. Other people want to be heard because they have bad intentions. Yeah. I think ATC and myself and you, we fall into the first category. I think other people that I will not mention fall into another category, but there's a caveat here, which is I have always told my son that often the only difference between good and evil is a matter of perspective, right? So the people that I believe are bad might be good in their own way, right? So there's that as well. But I think that's just the nature of, human conflict. We will always find, somebody who's opposed to us, and then we will engage with them in dialogue. I think it's called politics at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, exactly. And while we're kind of rewinding the clock a little bit, something that you said, and then you just kept going on with other things, but I know there's one thing that you said that's going to get picked up by everybody. And so I just want to clarify it real fast. And that was regarding the help that you will kind of offer, because, all right, so all these things like I asked Steve about, again, is that going to be a problem, right? And he said, no. You're saying yes, right? You understand things on a different level as him. So where I mean, I guess Superman maybe is back, it seems like, and until they actually hire somebody to fill your position, my question and everybody else's question was, were you going to be around to field questions, to answer this or that? But I think what you just said is that if they need you to consult or they need you to do whatever, you'll throw an hourly rate at them. If they can figure out how to do it, that's fine. It's not going to be volunteer work because Zaradar has nothing else to do. It's going to be a business transaction, yeah?
It's gonna be a bit of both, to be honest.
Okay.
There is certain work that I like doing, right? Like I like doing work like mentoring Vin and talking with Vin about his crazy ideas about the Kubernetes stuff, for instance. I do that on a running basis still.
Yeah.
So, for me, that would probably fall into the category of an auxiliary thing. And then there are primary things. And the primary things will have a fixed hourly rate. And the auxiliary things will probably have a slightly lower rate, right? Because, I mean, at the end of the day, looking at this as an investor, there's many different things that I can do, which all create value in various ways. But then there are things that we need done, which creates value here and now. And I think, we should focus on the things that need to be done, while also leaving a bit of room for the sort of more soft people things of handing over and supporting and stuff like that. Because I believe that, if I look at Q1, for instance, I spent maybe at least 100 hours, if not more, on supporting and coaching the other team members. And I enjoy doing that. That is what created flow in the team at the end of the day. And that is what you guys need somebody else to do, because there's nobody else in the L1 team that can do that. So we'll have to come up with some sort of agreement. I'll leave it for LBA to figure out what his mandate is and so on. I mean, I have a fixed hourly rate. I get offers all the time for around, 850 Danish kroner per hour. So that is my hourly rate. And then whatever Steve can afford, he can buy, right? And if there's something that we can't afford, and I feel that is an absolute necessity, and I feel that I'm well positioned to do it, chances are I'll probably do it anyways, because I'm also still an investor. But I think what most people have to remember here is that I invested a full year of my life into this every single day. So, I got paid 3 months sub wage, then I got terminated. I'm not really incentivized to be the investor who keeps doing a lot more than all the other investors, while all the other investors just sit around and, crack stupid jokes. Because why should I do that, right? They also have to step up and carry the burden. So I would prefer to see an outcome where my responsibilities are handed off to competent people who can manage them. You will probably need more than one person to do that. And in the interim, I will fill out the gap as well as I can, while still allowing me to focus on my own things.
Yeah. Arubasu says he read the dojo and baby, it was good. So he just
Well,
wanted
that's a
to,
good example of something that I would also want to do, and I wouldn't want to charge, my regular hourly rate for, because the dojo is one of the things that I actually enjoy doing in all of this. It's not just copying somebody else's code around or refactoring something or adding in a few lines. It's actually building something from scratch, right? There are two types of developers in this world. There are greenfield developers and there are brownfield developers. Greenfield, there's many types, but uh, when you do greenfield development, you're building new systems, right? When you do brownfield development, you're maintaining existing systems. The L1 work is very much brownfield because we inherited somebody else's system, and we're basically just maintaining it and patching it slightly here and there, right? Whereas something like the dojo is a lot more greenfield. I get to build it from the ground up. I really get to use my creative energies and all that funny stuff.
Mhm.
And I think that is what really also has been my stock and trade ever since I started working. I hate maintenance work. I am a greenfield developer. If you stick me in a brownfield development team for more than a year, I will just leave historically. I've done that multiple times. And this is why I never end up in these types of maintenance teams, because companies, they understand that they get more value from me elsewhere. And if they don't, then they risk losing me, right? So these are also things that goes into, keeping your talent happy, I guess. And I mean, for better or worse, we have now started hearing certain people talking about how maybe due to the way AI works and how rapid technology is moving, we need programmers to become politicians and help build a new regulatory world, because the existing politicians know fuck all about what's going on. The problem in all of this is that we're becoming an increasingly sought after commodity, which gives us this very, ivory tower like reality where we can literally pick and choose. And this is again one of my big concerns as an investor in Terra Classic, is that of all the different future employers out there for talent, we clearly have the worst job offering in the market. And if we don't create more fun stuff, if we don't create more dojos, if we don't get to parity, so we can start building new modules like the ABS keeper and start experimenting, then we will never attract the type of talent that will potentially turn our investment into a multi-billion-dollar thing, if not more, right? So that is also, I think, part of the reason why I was, and I still am, so adamant on the point of, well, the wages we are paying even in Q2 is too low. The only reason why Vin is doing this, considering his talent, is because he lives in Vietnam. And if you pay some dude in Vietnam, $7,000 a month, he can literally live like a king, right? So for him, his quality of life becomes so good that it becomes very attractive. But if you want to offer that same job to anybody in the US or the EU who is top talent, they will just look at that and say, you know what, that's not what I really want. And then at the end of the day, the key to higher valuations for us is getting into enterprises, right? The space for public high value blockchain is all chains are already saturated by the chains that came before us, like Bitcoin and Ethereum and Cardano and all of that. What Cosmos offers is a bunch of pre-baked public value networks that, given enough funding, can become kind of like Bitcoin, just with a bit more centralized liquidity provisioning. And that's okay, because at the end of the day, what the different companies want when they move into crypto is that they want to hedge themselves in a network that is, well functioning, is running, has existing users and so on, and that is not overly expensive. I mean, most people use Bitcoin as a gateway. That's probably why it has such a high amount of volume. But at the end of the day, I'm not certain that, companies will use Bitcoin for anything but tax loss selling for the next many, many decades, which means that most companies will be buying high and selling low. And then they will gradually push up the debt floor of Bitcoin, and then they will find other networks to siphon their core value into, where they can protect that in a more efficient way than you would be able to in, say, for instance, the Bitcoin network.
All right, for a second, Richie, what you're looking for is in the description, but I have to tell you, you have been extremely generous, my friend, throughout this whole crypto, this whole crypto YouTube thing that I'm doing, and it is the thought that counts. So that's absolutely not necessarily, but I just really appreciate you. Happy, if you are still there, and I think that you are, do me a favor. I want to move into a subject that I have some questions about, and I was very happy to brainstorm this with Tobias. But having you here is an added bonus. If you could send me just a hello or a DM or something on Discord, just so you go to the top of my list, I would like to send you the link, because if you'd like to jump in, I would like to run this by both of you and kind of get everybody's perspectives. Thank you very much, Richie. That was unnecessary. So if you could do that for me, Happy, and just let me know when you did it. Just say sent or whatever, and I'll send you the link. What I want to talk about, Tobias, I kind of mentioned it to you while we were chatting through DMs, I think, but I want to get your take on this. So we know that obviously the L1 task force has now been funded for Q2.
Well, I mean, have they?
What do you mean?
Again, they're funded at a price target. So price dropped, what, 15% last night?
Yeah.
I mean, they already lost 10% of their funding through no fault of their own.
Let me reword that. They know.
They have tokens worth something that will work for a certain while. Yeah.
Oh wait, Happy says I'm just heading out, Trev. I have to pass this time around. Hearing some good stuff though prior. I mean, maybe we can get back to this at some other time with Happy, because I really would, or maybe you could just hear what I'm going to say and do something on your own. But I would love your perspective on this. So if you don't get a chance to listen to it now and you can listen to it later, I'd really appreciate it. All right, so I'm going to reword it. The proposal passed for the L1 development team
to get a certain amount of tokens. Yeah.
Our original team to remain the team going into Q2.
Yeah.
And there was another proposal that was up for another team of software engineers who wanted the job. And so we went through a little kerfuffle over that 7 days, kind of bouncing back and forth. Just drop me a line and we can set up a date. Absolutely, Happy. I'll do so. Thank you very much. Went a little back and forth, right, where the original L1 team was, out the box. They were kind of ahead, but not at quorum. Then the other team also wasn't at quorum. They were way behind. They were a definite no. Then at one point, it totally flipped. And
this other team is a total joke. I don't even understand why people entertained it, because it was a violation of multiple things, right? First of all, this Bilbo troll Baggins dude, he's a notorious troll, right? But aside from the fact that he clearly disagrees with me in the political arena, he's also a validator. Making him a developer would violate the holy trinity of our blockchain that I've been teaching you all about for over a year, right?
But this is
so this guy will have to choose either he's a validator or he's a developer. There are many reasons why I do not run a validator node. One of them being that I'm a developer. right?
Mhm.
Then there's the Jacob Gattakin nonsense. Now, all of a sudden, a guy whom I had to negotiate down from $20,000 to $12,500 per month, who never materially did fuck all other than create noise, and then also come up like 2 weeks later asking for another 20,000. Now, all of a sudden, he's gonna work for $5,000. That's just him shoehorning his ass in there. And then all of a sudden that number will be much, much higher than any of you can ever dream of. When at some point in time, he decides which version of Cosmos he's actually going to shill. Is it 46 or is it 47? He can't really make up his mind, right? And then there's the rest of the guys whom I don't even know. The entire team is, aside from Jacob, fully doxed or undoxed. So it's like, you take this team of L1 people where everybody, except for one person, is fully doxed, is credible, to work within the IT space, and you substitute them with a bunch of known trolls. I was just face-palming myself for a few weeks there, to be honest.
All right. If you're done with your tizzy,
I'm done with my tizzy. I just had to put it out there just so people understand what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I guess that was inevitable. So I'm glad you got that off your chest. All right. Where the hell was I? All right. So anyway, things were flip-flopping around a bit, right? And then at one point they were a hard yes, and our original team was kind of a hard no. It was looking really bad for them, right? And then, obviously, toward the end, then All Nodes comes in, boom, 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 votes for the original team. The numbers go up. We're positive again. We're at quorum. Everything's beautiful. The other team was still hanging in there, and it seemed like I thought All Nodes would have voted for both at the same time, but they kept us in suspense for a little while, and then they voted no for the other team, which tanked them, right? And ultimately, at the end of the day, what we have is the original L1 task force going into Q2. This other task force was rejected, okay? But here's my point. This all played out, and the community did wonderfully, right? Everybody got in and voted. You had options. It is what it is, right? You had options, so some people went here, some people went there. But ultimately, this whole thing played out. It was really the validators that moved this thing one way or the other, right?
Well, that's the beauty of living in an oligarchy, right? You don't have to worry about free speech and democracy.
Yeah. So, all right. I don't even know how to word it.
I know I just threw you a curveball there, but I'm used to you.
A little bit, but it's all right. I'm getting used to you. So basically, there was a time where we were voting or talking very heavily, and there were proposals coming out and everything about reducing validator voting power, right? Again, we wanted the guys who had a shitload of voting power, the All Nodes, the Orions, the whatever, right? We wanted to bring that down, bring some of the smaller guys up, and even things out a little bit, because it was absolutely unfair, right? And I was all along with that. I bought that whole line of thinking, right? Sure, everybody should be fair, right?
Yeah, except for the fact that JP Morgan literally 10 years ago stipulated economic theory that proved that doing business in a malicious fashion is better than doing business in a good fashion if your end goal is to accumulate as much economic power as possible.
Yeah.
Or put another way, there's a reason why the Google AI snake that had a laser on its head, which had to collect apples, killed all the other players in the game before collecting even a single apple, right?
Yeah.
So, but anyways, yeah.
All right. So, Richie's telling me he's going to miss this with Zarda. Nobody said that we're not going to keep chatting. Anyway, so my mind during this whole process, I don't know if my mind has actually changed about that, because what happened was we've got, it appears to me, this is just my opinion, nothing factual, right? But I put out a video about it too. It feels like that this was a coup attempt. It feels like this was an absolute well thought out plan that started a long time ago under all of our noses, and we didn't even realize it, right? And the
No,
plan was,
I think I saw your YouTube video. You don't have to explain it to me.
but not everybody did, right?
Okay, sorry.
So, all right. So, it felt like a plan to me. It felt like what they were trying to do was move themselves into the position where they are now, the L1 team. They're kind of running things or whatever. And the way to do that was through governance, was through validators, maybe that they controlled, to vote for them. And in order to do that, they had to lower the voting power and take some delegations away from the big guys that they did not control. And we know that there are individuals who actually have multiple validators. So
Yeah.
if we succeed one day in lowering and setting a limit, right, be it 10%, 5%, whatever it is, voting power on
It
validators.
does not matter. It
Why?
cannot be done in any meaningful way, right? That's why
Okay, go ahead.
I've always been so. So first, to give you a short answer and then followed by a long rant. There is no way to avoid malicious actors partitioning their funds into multiple wallets and setting up basically one validator node per server that they run, right? They could do
Right.
that easily.
Yeah.
So what is the lower limit? It doesn't matter. They can generate an infinite number of accounts. So they would just basically create, let's say we set the limit at 1% and somebody owned 20% of the network voting power. Then they would just create 20 proxy validators,
And divvy
and
it up
then they would
1%
write
per, yeah.
a backend that
Yeah.
would allow them to command and control all 20 proxy validators with one click. And then from their end, it would still be the same. They would just
Right.
be doing a few extra transactions in the network. But overall, due to the pseudonymity of how blockchains work, it would be almost impossible for anybody to figure out, right? And that is the price that we pay for pseudonymity. And this is why when the all nodes storyline broke, and this is where we go into the ranting territory, the timeline is something like this. I was happily sitting around playing Dota with some friends. And then I think it was Danny DeFi. He reached out to me on Twitter in a DM and said, listen, dude, blah, 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 blah. So I finished my game and I looked at it, started digging around the internet a bit to try to figure out what's going on. And I quickly identified basically what you explained in your video the other day. Because there was a lot of concurrent activities going on that all centered around generating capital for Notional Labs, who had just experienced a liquidity or a liquidation event in some other context that I'm not privy to, so I don't know. So he reaches out to me, I do the thing, I look at the setup, and I conclude that there is no way to control these things because there is no way to do proportional slashing in Cosmos yet. And that means that by and large, it's not a problem because it can't be fixed, right? You have to understand that on the vector of security threats, there are many different aspects that goes into analyzing if something is a security problem. Inherently, security experts, they know that everything is kind of always at risk. So you have to gauge which fires to fight. And there are some fires that you cannot fight. Let's say there's a vulnerability in the operating system version you're using, but you have a 20-year-old key platform component that cannot run on any other version of the operating system, but that one version. Well, then from a security perspective, you accept that risk because the cost of fixing it is too high. In the case of the all nodes problem, the cost of fixing that security issue was completing what's called an ADR, which is I think it's an architectural design recommendation or something like that in the Cosmos scope that has been going on since 2020 related to what's called proportional slashing, wherein the software would be rewritten to identify nodes that are similar in nature in terms of what software they run, blah, 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 so that they could penalize similar wallets for strange behavior. But the problem with that is that then gives rise to the, how can you say, joker factor, which is if somebody's willing to watch it all burn, they can go in and they can start slashing all nodes by deploying a validator that mimics all nodes setup and then starting acting maliciously, right? That's why this thing has never passed. This is why there is no real solution, because the only proposed solution is based on theoretical math. And there's not really any clear-cut solutions for griefing attacks, which is why I believe that the whole tokenization thing will not be solvable until we introduce digital identities into the mix, because we can issue digital identities to wallets that do not trace back to people, but that are still unique enough to be shared across many wallets. So they would just become your Trev avatar, right? But that Trev avatar would then be your digital identity, and that would allow us to trace your token ownership across all wallets in all blockchains, for instance, which will probably become a regulatory requirement at some stage of regulatory maturity in 5 to 10 years' time.
But I mean, that doesn't, am I not understand? That doesn't really solve like collusion or anything like that, right? Like if, you know, I've got my node or whatever, and, you know, I've got my digital ID. So any other nodes that I have, it's all on that. But what if, you know, my good friend Zarda has a node, my good friend, this one there has a node, and that one there has a node, and I'm pulling the puppet strings and running them all, and they're not like digitally tied to me. Isn't that just kind of like the workaround?
No, but I mean, the workaround is kind of like that, but I guess that is the, you know, digital equivalent of gerrymandering, right? At some stage, what these guys are doing is just politics. They are just, you know, creating many different types of political parties to make it seem like they're bigger than they are or whatnot. But at the end of the day, all it boils down to is voting power. And you know, one of the things that I keep getting back to whenever people get into these abstract discussions about community sentiment and the will of the community and all that is that we still only have like what 14% of total tokens staked. That is, you know, from a voter turnout perspective, the functional equivalent of a very dysfunctional democracy, right? So at any given time, somebody could just, you know, up the ante, go buy 2 trillion tokens. I know it would cost a shit ton of money, but then all of a sudden that would, you know, put them in charge of consensus and thus in charge of democracy in the way that we see it, right? But that's okay, I reckon. I've always had this view and signaled this view is that if somebody comes in and buys up all the tokens, then it's their right to decide, and then other people will have to you know, decide whether or not they want to stay on board with that or sell their tokens and go somewhere else. And I think the balance, especially when you're dealing with public blockchains, is obviously that as an investor, you don't want to be the guy ending up holding the entire bag on your own. So all the big investors, they will look for other investors to hedge into networks, and we're nowhere near that, which means that right now we are at the mercy of a few high net worth individuals and a few high net worth day traders who are quite literally just doing pump and dump mechanics, which is why we always seem to be stuck in this buy the rumor, sell the news cycle, right? When these things happen, it's a clear indication that you are stuck in a pump and dump setup, right? Because the fact of the matter is that every event that the L1 team produced in Q1 was a sell the news event, right? At every given incident, price just kept going down. Even the Terraport stuff was a sell the news event and so on and so forth. And I guess nobody knows where the bottom is, but that is the problem you have when you have, a small group of people controlling a large amount of tokens, and that won't really change until they either get diluted or everybody sells all of their tokens, at which point these guys will close their short positions, and then you will probably start noticing people who have been absent from the dialogue for the last 6 months turning up on Twitter and all sorts of places, promising all sorts of wild fantasies again. Because now they've probably bought back in and now they believe in long again and all of that. These are typical characteristics to watch for if you want to spot, what I equate to the bad actors who are not really here to do anything other than rent seek. And rent seeking is, basically what kills a blockchain network at the end of the day. If the amount of rent seeking exceeds the amount of value creation, then you get stuck in a perpetual downwards trend. And you can have 128 decimals in a Cosmos decimal. So, there's a lot of zeros to go if you want to get to the bottom, just from a price perspective.
Yeah. Fire King, welcome. I'm glad you could join us. I guess my question is, had we at some point in the past succeeded in limiting voting power, and all nodes this time around had 10% or maybe 5%. I know you went extreme down to 1%, but some of the things that have been proposed have been 5%, 10%. If they had actually had 5% or 10%, it doesn't seem like they would have been able to switch things around or kind of rescue the L1 team the way that they did.
Well, I don't know. I think people at the end of the day kind of forget that the delegators still have the power to override the validator. So if the people delegating with a validator were inclined to disagree, they could shift the vote in another direction. I understand that by and large this doesn't happen, but I'd like to also comment on another observation, which is that all nodes has been running with a fairly high commission percentage compared to, say, Orion and TCV, yet their overall voting power is still stubbornly high.
Are they still at 10%?
I haven't checked recently. I think they were, something like, I think it was 2-digit percentages last I checked.
Yeah.
My point is that, comparatively to that, you have Orion that still runs their auto compounding with 0%, I think it is, because that's basically just an automated thing running itself. And the same holds true for TCV, right? So the bottom line here is that regardless of them collecting commissions, a lot of people still delegate with all nodes, which for me is indicative of a representative democracy wherein a certain amount of delegators has simply just aligned themselves with the politics of all nodes. Because maybe these delegators represent investors in all nodes existing business network, right? Maybe they are just a large percentage of the actual investors that are long-term holders. And maybe they do prefer to place their money with all nodes because regardless of the commission, the money keeps staying there, right? So I think that the point in all of this is that, as I've said many times before, the all node situation is not a problem, it's a symptom, right? I never said the symptom part, but that's just to put it into perspective. All nodes is probably the biggest investor group in our network right now, but we still only have roughly 14% of all tokens staked, which means that at any given time, some whale could emerge from the woodworks and just buy 2 trillion tokens and basically take over ownership. But we don't have the maturity as a network to attract these type of investors. And, you know, these guys, they don't just throw money at random things because people, they do nice memes on Twitter or produce a few NFTs. They're looking for sustainability. They're looking for stability. They're looking for good entry points, shit like that. And if they get all of these things, then they will probably be able to provide the levels of liquidity and attract the types of investors that would then, you know, trigger a new bull cycle for long.
Richie, I saw your questions in your super chat, and I'm going to ask them. I didn't want to, because they're nothing, you know, according to what we're talking about right now. So I just didn't want to kind of split it up. So I will get to those in a minute. So is there, or is there not, a better system? Is there some way, some system that we can devise or develop, or maybe, you know, whatever, something else that's out there that we can copy, that would protect us from what you described, these bad actors getting multiple nodes?
Yes, there is.
What would that be?
You can start by adopting a constitution that is legally binding for the entire chain. That is basically the physical equivalent of an end user license agreement. You do the same thing with your iPhone, you just don't bother to read it.
Mm-hmm.
There is precedent for this. I actually once crafted such a proposal with Venus. It just never went anywhere. So the bottom line is that you can adopt the constitution, and within that constitution, you can enforce self-regulation to the point where the community pool will hire and pay some legal representative to allow all owners of LONC to become what we call accredited investors, meaning that they have gone through a KYC and AML check. And in exchange for that, they will be issued with some sort of valid digital identity. That would pave the road to rid us of all these people, because you have to remember that the only reason why these people are doing this, why the rabbis of the world exist, is because they can, you know, do what they do from the comfortable safety of their parents' basement, right? And I mean, you're an American, you should be familiar with the concept of swatting, right? There was recently an unfortunate incident where some guy got killed in his home because some teenager called the police on another kid he lost a $1 bet to online or some stupid shit like that, right? So the point is just that, yeah, I mean, this is what we have to try to just figure out. But yeah, I'm getting tired also, to be honest. So I think, you know, where do we go from here is probably the more interesting question at the end of the day. And I think what we have to do is just, you know, keep doing what we're doing individually. We have to keep fighting the misinformation if we want to create a better reality. If we don't want to create a better reality, then we will be a meme coin for as long as these people can pump the value by 1,000%. Convince a lot of new people to buy in, and then short the value by the same amount plus a bit more. Because every time they successfully do something like this, where they get people to sell off at a loss, meaning that, you know, people lose money, then these pump and dump mechanics can keep going on a downward trajectory, which is more akin to how exchange traded notes or ETNs work, which from a mathematical perspective have been proven to always create a loss scenario for investors, and the house will always win, right? So if you trade ETNs with, say, Credit Suisse, some guys, quants, I think it was in Australia, they did the math over 6 months. They found out that it didn't matter if you were trading long or short, you would always lose due to how these instruments behaved, because they were just virtual instruments. They were really not backed by anything than what the institute said they were worth, right? So that is some of the problems also in these types of spaces. And I mean, yeah, I think regulation is the only way to do it, because I think at the end of the day, the bad actors will always be here. One of the things historically with new technology is that some of the people who adopted the quickest are criminals, because they're very risk averse, or sorry, very risk prone. And they, you know, need every edge they can get. I mean, 5-10 years ago, I was getting calls from my childhood friends asking me if I could help them develop tracking systems for police cars in Copenhagen, so they could do their thing. And, you know, I clearly said no, because as I've said a few times before, that is not the world I wanted to live in. I partially grew up in such a world, and I wanted to do something else, right? But the fact of the matter is that these actors will be there, and until they leave, we will be stuck in this toxic, noisy, illogical environment that only really drives people nuts at the end of the day.
This group of people that we are referring to, and some that you have named, have tried several different angles and several different ways to get some sort of foothold, to get some sort of control. They've tried several different proposals, and they keep getting put down by the community. It appears that the community very clearly wants to go a certain way. The majority of the community, they obviously have their followers, right? But they don't represent the majority. After this loss, you still don't think they're going to give up? You think they're going to try something else, or will they get the hint?
I mean, at the end of the day, in their mind, I think one of the reasons why Ed and I got so much positive feedback from the actual community is that we never really wanted to be the bosses of it all, right? I think a lot of these people, they think that they can become the CEOs of a $600 million company. And as long as they have that fantasy in their head, they will keep fighting for as long as they can, right? And, you know, I don't know who ends out on top. I don't think anybody inherently ever will, which I think is the nature of public blockchains, because again, we're playing the infinite game, right? So I think from my perspective, it's more about, you know, what style of leadership you want to have. And in the current world that we live in, there seems to be two competing schools of leadership. There is the strongman autocracy that governs through fear and power. And that's typically hard power, not soft power. And then there are the wise, altruistic, you know, representatives who, you know, govern through consensus and soft power, right? That's what the EU and the US has been doing for decades, or ever since World War II. And I think, you know, we're still trying to figure out what type of network we have to be. I think you and I are clearly in, you know, the democracy camp. Maybe other people are more in the oligarchy camp, or I don't know. But at the end of the day, we started as an oligarchy. We started with a strong leader. We're still finding our footing, and I think right now the battle is much more over the future of that aspect of the network than it is over who's going to write a few lines of code here and there. And where that all ends out, I don't know. I hope it ends out on the side of democracy and people start, taking charge of their own reality. But having worked in this place for a while, I also see again and again that people are more than willing to give away their personal rights and freedoms for the convenience of just having somebody else take the risk for them. So maybe we will just naturally drift towards the latter. And if we need this strongman person, then as you and I have talked about many times before, I can become a benevolent tyrant, but I don't want to be. So I will most likely just step away, and then somebody else will naturally step in and fill the void that Ed and I left behind. And who that somebody is, I don't know right now, and I don't really care, to be quite frank.
Have you talked to Ed? Is Ed, there were, whispers of Ed maybe being, somewhat maybe still involved, maybe just the same way that you're talking about yourself. Is he totally gone? Is he doing his AI thing? Is he the TGF? What, any idea?
I don't know. I haven't spoken with him for a few weeks now.
Oh yeah. Okay.
But I mean, even before that, I think on a monthly basis, we only spoke a few hours. He's quite busy. I mean, he has, again, 4 kids and a wife and a job, and he teaches community college AI courses and stuff. I mean, it was always only ever meant to be a reality where Ed was sort of like a front figure. But because that's what his calendar allowed him to do. But I think what he's doing right now is probably the same as me. He's just sleeping a lot and relaxing and trying to wind down, because him and we have literally been on a war footing for 12 months, and it's taxing, it's tiring, and I think we're just both enjoying the peace of not having to be, the primary daycare attendants in this somewhat adolescent network of relatively inexperienced investors who seems to think that if USDC mints a green candle, then I should pay 3 million USD worth of economic value for some code that I didn't even write, that was created years ago, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's, So I think my view on it right now is that I think now is a good time to just step out and, focus on other things, let things sort themselves out, be here to assist if people need me, because that is in my interest as an investor. And then, like so many other networks before, other people will eventually turn up and take on some of the responsibilities, either because their bags are so large that they are, incentivized to do so, or because they are looking for, a fair priced public blockchain that they can buy so they can start transacting in the crypto realm and stuff like that, right? And I mean, in the context of our valuation, I don't know what our market cap currently is, towards like $600 million or whatever, something like that. I mean, you don't need a Microsoft or a Google to buy up your public network to reach a higher valuation. There's lots of other companies out there that could, buy a significant share of our network and transact in that, and just set up a few validators to bolster the network and, factor in the cost of the LCD traffic as a cost of doing business. And before you know it, they have their own public blockchain where they can do supply chain tracking and, put small pieces of data on the public ledger, because that's really what it was designed for. It was designed for small pieces of information, and then you can do like some database triggers, or smart contracts as we call them, that can somewhat change things around. But we have to also be careful about, building everything as a smart contract, because at some point it just doesn't become very efficient anymore. Right, there are certain aspects we do on the blockchain, like state management, certificate validation, whatever, or signature validation and stuff like that. But by and large, with SegWit, Bitcoin showed us that we could remove, the transactional data from the signature data and still have an efficient, stable, secure network. So I think that is, what blockchains are good for. They're good for managing, agreements, basically, which typically just boils down to a binary of true or false, right? And then maybe some amount of textual data or whatever. But yeah, so I think, I don't know. I think we're in a good place. I think people will be okay without me. I think I am obviously very happy and privileged that so many people have felt that I have, contributed to their life. And like I said, I never left. I just figured out that I needed to have a different day to day again, because crypto is too volatile for my liking. And then I will still be, fully hedged in long as an investor. I will still be accumulating long once in a while and so on. That is the nature of the investment that I'm, in the process of holding or carrying to fruition, or what do you want to call it?
I think that Steve has things as much under control as he can. He seems to be working his ass off to make it work without you, which is probably, I mean, he has no choice. It's something he was forced into. It's not what he wanted. We clearly knew that, but it's what he's doing. And so I think that we are in a good place. I think that we're in good hands. And I think that things will go well. A couple minutes ago, you mentioned USTC, and it's probably the best segue I'm going to get into Richie's question. He asked, he says, does Zarda think that the Ziggy program will work, and are we ready for it? Now, I know that Richie, from the beginning, has not really been a proponent of this Ziggy program. So how do you want to answer that?
Ziggy is an idea. It's a castle in the sky. But it won't work in its current shape, I think. I think it needs, and I've told Duncan this, more work, and I think Duncan recognizes this. I think for me, Ziggy was just an opportunity to basically revive something that I've been trying to get the quantitative TradeFi crowd to do for a long time, which is produce a white paper on how they want this system to behave and then come to agreement on that. Because as being one of the sort of people that a lot of other people sort of went through in order to gauge their ideas or so on, I think I've seen at least 50, if not more, different repeg ideas. And, at the end of the day, for me, it just became like, okay, this idea, I've seen it before, but there's a twist here. So it's kind of like that with that. And I never really understood why all of these highly intelligent, highly capable people couldn't just, book a fucking meeting using Calendly or whatever and get together and debate and agree on a single course of action to present for the developers, so they could actually meaningfully start changing the algorithm into something that would work, right? Because we've seen a lot of theoretical fantasies from people like Alex, but by and large, those things won't work without significant implementation work, and the implementation work can't be done of somebody's sketched idea on a cocktail napkin along with a few diagrams and so on, that requires extensive, research and development, which in itself is quite costly. So I think the only way to really go about building anything like these extensions to the capital controls is to gain consensus and then make that part of the L1 team scope and then have them start, working through that. Because I do believe that that is the use case for this blockchain. That is what it should be doing. It shouldn't be peddling NFTs or whatever wireframes of buildings or casino smart contracts or whatnot, because all of these will just start piling in to the state of things and end up clogging up the database, where they should probably have some side chains to run their primary stuff, yada, yada, yada. I don't know if that kind of answered the question.
Yeah, I mean, I've been bitching kind of about the same thing for a long time. Bunch of smart guys, bunch of great ideas. They don't all necessarily work together. And there seems to be this competitive thing, like I want to be the one to get my idea to work. Now Redline Drifter has an idea out. That's, they all, every time they come out, they gain a lot of steam because, they're promoting them and marketing them and
People
talking them
use
up
it to generate FOMO. And I mean, I think by and large, the last price spike that we saw before the drop to where we currently are was driven off the Siggy FOMO, right? Which is also why there's a certain inherent danger in presenting these things if they have not been fully vetted and fully quantified and reasoned about, because it's fairly easy for me to design an impossible system in a virtual setting, especially if I do not understand what it actually takes to build the system, right? It would basically be like an amateur building their own house. I'm sure they can envision it in their head, but when the house is done, it's not really going to be a house, right?
Right. Yeah.
And you might even have seen something like that in your career. That's probably why you're laughing.
Constantly, yeah. And then they call us.
Yes, and then it's twice as expensive and they happily pay because they feel like fools.
Because I gotta undo their bullshit before I can start over again. But I guess like I was saying, I've been bitching about it a while because welcome to 100% decentralization. This is what everybody wants, right? It's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And here we are coming out with proposal after proposal after proposal, all good proposals, but nobody can reach a consensus on which way to go, or is there a way to combine them or whatever. So we just keep putting them out there and talking about how great they are, but then nothing happens. Which leads me, and I don't necessarily want to go into it right now because I know that you said you're tired and we're coming up on almost 2 hours, but which leads me into what I also keep talking about, and that is some sort of central, and I know everybody hates the word, but central
Senate
group to organize all this, and Senate leadership council, whatever the fuck you want to call it.
It is the only thing that is proven to work, and it works both in China and in the US, just in two different kind of ways, right?
Yeah, right.
So it's quite simple. You have people run for Senate. You could fairly easily adapt the L1 code to accommodate a reality where addresses on a list in the distribution module would be allowed to how can you say, allocate community pool funds based on a multi-sig solution, right? That would allow us to fast track spendings. It would avoid this voting gridlock that always seems to come up. It would provide forward guidance for new people coming in, because they could, actually interact with defined senators who maybe even, spend time, being senators and talking with constituents and with new businesses and so on. So that is the way that will work, because this is what is dictated by Conway's law, and Conway's law is universally applicable in almost all software, because humans are like fucking monkeys, right? If we want to do something, we look at the world and then we just kind of mimic what reminds like that, and then we try to shape it into what we think it has to be.
Yeah. What is this affinity for 100% decentralization when we've been doing this for a
no
year?
Such thing.
Go ahead.
This idea of, first of all, decentralization is just a unit of measurement in a distributed system, right?
Okay.
A centralized distributed system and a decentralized distributed system are both distributed systems, meaning that they are systems that are working with more than one computer, right? Because that is what a distributed system is. What is really at stake here is the consensus or the command and control element. In a highly centralized distributed system, one person has the key to fire the nukes. In a decentralized system, you need at least 2 keys to fire the nukes, right? So it's really just a matter of how much inherent rigidity we want, right? The more decentralized we are, the more rigid it becomes. But rigidity can be annoying, but it also provides sturdiness and stamina, right? If you're rigid, you're also typically strong. You can endure a lot, right? A centralized system is nimble and fragile because it only takes, one hacker to hack one key and then everything's fucked. Whereas in a decentralized system, you have, more keys you need to steal to fuck everything. And that makes it harder to hack. And there are pros and cons. And we have different metrics we measure. But we have this one thing called mean time to recovery, which is typically the amount of time a development team needs to introduce a feature change into production, right? And this thing is typically fairly low in centralized systems, and it's very, very high in decentralized systems, because there's simply more checks and balances you need to go through in these decentralized systems. And again, based on what you want, you do different things. If you want to have a high frequency trading platform that transacts millions of transactions per second, there is no way that you can do it in a highly decentralized distributed system. It's simply not possible. You can offload part of that, which is like the validation of things like the checksums and so on, to a slower system, but you still need a high frequency system running next to it that will then once in a while stop up and sync with the blockchain, right? But that is how you balance centralization and decentralization. The problem is that blockchain maximalists has turned decentralization into a concept of its own, which it isn't really. You don't build decentralized things per se, because by its nature, a distributed system is decentralized. There's more than one server that needs to go offline for the network to stop working.
These decentralization hardliners, as I call them, who don't want to hear anything about balancing a certain amount of centralization with it. To me, I feel like they're just kind of not paying attention to, what is the definition of insanity, right? Keep doing the same thing over and over again, but expect a different result. We've been doing this way for a year.
I think you have to keep in mind, if we go back an hour or so, when I talked about the whole golden hammer thing, for a lot of these people, this thing has become a new chance at a better life, and they have latched onto it like the holy fucking Bible, which means that there is only one way, and that is the canonical way, and they will broker no dissent, because they don't have the creative mental capacity to entertain another idea. And I think it was Einstein or something who said something along the lines of being able to entertain any perspective on something or whatever shit, right? The point of the matter is that people who are stuck in a single track narrative are typically not very intelligent, or they're more intelligent than all of us combined, right? Either they're doing something that only they understand, and then they're so smart that they should just be given all the funding and all the time to succeed, or they're basically just faking it till they make it, while, reiterating stuff that they regurgitated on Reddit and on the internet and so on.
Well, I would encourage everyone to actually open your minds up a little bit, and look at the way things have been going, look at where we are a year later. And in a lot of ways, we're miles ahead of where we were. I mean, you guys did really awesome work with the L1 team as far as updates and upgrades and, getting us pretty damn close to parity. But
I think we did magnificent work. And to be quite honest, I know a lot of people. I was having this talk about with LBA the other day, because somebody is complaining about us not having completed the Q1 scope or something like that, which we have, right? Yeah. I think the current word fuckery is over the word deploy around the Oracle feeder. But the fact of the matter is that the Oracle feeder handles people's private keys, so we can't deploy it for them, right? They have to do it themselves. We can only make the release available. So it's really just bad wording in the initial proposal. We have made the pre-release available for testing, and they can, install it and deploy it and so on. But the bottom line, I think, in all of this is really that the reason why I know we succeeded is because none of these people are suing me. I mean, I put myself out there. I even on a space was asked by somebody, I don't know who should be held responsible for the work in Q1. And I think I clearly said Ed and myself and Steve. And, that means that all of these people who are our detractors and who seem to work against us personally, they would have been suing us up the yin yang if we had, done something that was actually criminal or hadn't really delivered on what we promised to deliver on. So this is why I know we delivered.
I don't know that anybody actually truly believes that. I think it's a narrative that is spun to try to sow discord and division with the community, maybe turn some people against you guys, so that they can get some sort of attention and maybe move some people over to their way. I can't imagine that anybody actually truly believes that a bad job was done in any way, shape, or form in Q1.
I don't think so either, but I mean, it's still, some people still stated I still had to endure something akin to an Spanish Inquisition from Rexy, who showed up on the last day demanding that I explain my work that I did, even though comparatively to Till I make the same hourly wage, and he was not making that demand of Till. There are just some people in this network that are clearly amateurs and that clearly only thrives off playing Machiavellian games. And, that's just how it is. And, I don't know how long they will persist or be around, but I'm happy not to have to deal with that on a daily basis, at least.
Yeah, I bet you are. So Peter,
it's like,
go ahead.
I mean, it's kind of like, I literally, one of the reasons why the Q2 proposal failed was because I think I spent 2 months trying to convince TGF and Steve, so Ed, Steve, and Marco, to basically just give Demon a fucking seat at the table, right? People have this idea that there's an imaginary council table where people have all sorts of power, right? The fact of the matter is that people like Ed and Marco and myself, we're just public servants. We just carry a shit ton of weight. And that means that there's really no special privileges here, which is why I was like, guys, for reasons we cannot reason about, there's a faction belonging to Demon Monkey who's very vocal. And if we give that faction a seat at the table, which would then eventually turn into the Senate thing that you and I had talked about, maybe things would have turned out differently. And I tried to lobby and mediate for that for months. And then literally, I think 3 days before or whatever, I had a 2-hour talk with Demon, which he recorded. So I'm sure that's going to be posted online at some point, where I kind of got him to just kind of stand down. And then the next day, LBA gets into a fight with him in a space, and it's full DEFCON 5. I mean, from my perspective, I've been trying to put up a house of cards for 12 months now. And every time I'm really close to getting there, some fucking dude explodes out of the woodworks with some personal whatever shit. And then everything collapses and I get to start all over again, right? And I think that is really, I think, one of the things that I wish that everybody could maybe learn from all of this is that please stop making it about your personal things. You are a public value network of shared investors. Your only future is in your ability to efficiently reach consensus. If you are a broken consensus engine, nobody will buy your tokens. Full stop.
Yep. Yeah. A lot of people forget that. It's forgotten often. Grizzly asked me, Trev, have you still undelegated your lunk? Yes, my LUNC is still undelegated. It's been undelegated for, I don't know, maybe 5 to 6 days now, I guess, maybe a week. And I had said that I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I haven't sold it, if that's what you're asking. I still have it. And I am undecided exactly what I'm going to do with it. If I were to redelegate it, I would probably redelegate it right back to Lunk Development Fund. I believe that they are doing phenomenal work and probably one of, if not the best in my estimate. I don't know every validator, so I can't really say that, but of the validators that I know of, they're the best. And that's where I would probably go. I might spread it out to this one and that one. I don't know, but I don't even know that I'm going to do that yet. I'm really not sure. Peter says that I don't think Zarada is a bad actor, just misrepresented. Everyone has a personality and it's up to us to understand. I mean, I don't know if anybody before that suggested that Zarada was a bad actor. I know some people want to spin that narrative, but I've said many times that Zaradar has a very distinct way about him, or talking to you, you have a very distinct way about you. There is some arrogance, there is a lot of confidence, and these are all things that I deal with on a daily basis, and that's really the only way I know how to get by. So it's just a matter of understanding that personality and appreciating those traits for what they are. There is nothing wrong with a person being confident, and maybe sometimes even a little overconfidence can be positive.
If I can add something here, I think
sure.
I think you're totally right. I mean, part of my new boss's main concern, and he's said that many times, is aligning me with the younger alpha he already has in the team when I start, right? But these are natural things. I think, you know, at the end of the day, it's like, I don't know how to put it. I kind of had it on my tongue for a second and then I lost it. I'll get back to that in a second. Never mind.
Okay. All right. I like the idea. We are too wishy-washy. Richie says, I wish Zarada the best and hope he gets more family time. Yogaba is in the chat. He must have just got here. Says Z is not, I'm assuming unhinged.
Oh, wait, yeah. No, I've remembered what
Remember,
I was
all right,
say
go ahead,
now.
quick.
So the point in all of this is that I'm a very distinct character. My father was the OG hashish smuggler in Denmark. I literally grew up as the son of the Prince of Thieves, right? My brother can't really go to Denmark because he's not my real brother, it's my half brother. One of my oldest childhood friends have been convicted twice for murder. I have a very strict view on right and wrong because my mother navigated me out of that into a path of science and computing. That means that I think a lot of the attacks against me are mainly against me to make me go away, because my moral code makes it harder for people to basically run Ponzi schemes in our network.
Right.
And that is obviously something that certain individuals don't like, because that puts them at a disadvantage, and sometimes it even puts them at risk, right? So obviously eliminating such a barrier is a good thing if you want to run a perpetual rug pull Ponzi scheme.
Mhm.
And I think by and large, me stepping out has value, because I mean, just as arrogant and strong-minded as convictive as I can be or whatever, all of this noise that gets generated out of that also can become too much. So maybe it's good for us to have a period where Serdar is just sidelined with taking care of his life and just being around in case we need him. And then if other people emerge that can carry us into the future, great. If not, then some of these bad actors will probably sell off. And then when we do, resume whatever journey that we begun at some point in the future, then we don't have to deal with those people anymore. Because I also have to contend with the knowledge every single day that everything I do for the blockchain doesn't only reward the people I care about, it also rewards the people that I do not care about. And the more value I produce for those people, the more ammunition I give them to basically make my life hell. So, you can see the problem in that, I hope.
Yeah. You had alluded to at one time that if and when you were ever free from the L1 task force and kind of free to be your own man, that there was maybe some legal things that you wanted to pursue regarding particular individuals. I'm assuming you know what I'm talking about. Is that something that is actually happening, or have you eased up on that, or what?
I don't know. I mean, that remains to be seen, I guess. That's the only answer I'm willing to give right now. What I will say is that I find the idea that Demon, for instance, wanting to do some sort of legal thing quite amusing, because that actually, opens him up to countersuits. But maybe lawsuits are what we need to cleanse out some of these things and bring the truth to the to the surface, if you may. But right now, I'm just focusing on starting my new job. There is statutes of limitations on laws.
Yeah.
So, as long as I don't exceed those, I can do whatever I want, whenever I want.
Okay. Goldilocks says, Zarada, keep going. The good guys won. Keep shutting down these losers and like to shut down, like you shut down Confio.
Yeah.
Arubasu says, I wrote something for Z on Agora. I wrote it just now, so I don't know. Maybe you'll find
I don't go to Agora ever.
Yeah,
It's
that's probably the worst place to put it,
somewhere
Aru.
else.
He just does not
I
deal
mean,
with.
why would I want to go to Do Kwon's personal web server to read information? I mean, fuck me. How stupid do you think I am?
Here we go. All right. Yogaba says, same stuff happened with literally every group that was putting work, and everyone else was upset because they just craved attention. It's just.
Well, that's the problem with an
We have to deal with.
attention-driven economy, right? That is what the whole world is trying to come to grasp with, is that when you cannot really produce more value because the resources on Earth are finite and so on, how do you keep the stock Ponzi running until you can go into space and collect resources in space, right? And they call this, I guess, the attention-driven economy, where the Tesla stock pumps from, I don't know, whatever low value to whatever $1,000 or wherever it went, and then back down to, it's crazy. but that's what's happening when, you know, you start bringing retail investors online who are not, you know, capable of reasoning and who invest with their hearts more than their minds most of the time.
Lump Candy says, can Z, well, you must have got here a little late, Lump Candy. The question is, can Z ever see himself working with the L1 team again? We actually talked about that like very early on in this. Z has a full-time job that he will be starting soon. In the meantime, if there is some work or something that he can do that you know, that he enjoys, there's going to be some things that he's going to do that he enjoys doing, something that they might need consultation work or whatever, you know, that's a possibility too. Depends, you know, some things might be paid for, some things might be volunteer. I mean, we'll see how it actually goes, right? But as far as being a permanent member of the L1 team, it doesn't appear that that is going to be likely anytime in the future. Not after accepting this full-time job. Grizzly says, I've never heard this saying before. Currently, Lunk is a soup sandwich. Whatever that means.
Yeah, I don't think I ever heard that concept before either, but he's probably right.
He says that you and Ed are the reasons that he stuck around in Lunk, and I think that a lot of people share that same sentiment. So, you know, it always seems like the voices of negativity feel the loudest in our heads and in our hearts. If you have 20 people screaming at you about how much they love you and how great you are, that one guy that's like, I don't know, that's the one you go home thinking about at night, right?
I think for me, it's not really the Twitter stuff.
Yeah.
It's the more personal stuff where people, they prank call me from Congo, or guys, I have now 3 different people who claim they're suicidal, who want my help with their USTC back.
You told me about that.
I have a real world, I don't know who she is, but she's some Indian woman from London who will write me multiple pages of highly, you know, biased, illogical emails where she will attack me and my personality and put words in my mouth and ascribe all sorts of malicious behavior to my actions. I mean, it's those types of things that really does it, because that's just a step too far. I've had emails where people are mimicking police, you know, documents stating that I have committed child, you know, molestation things and so on. These are the kind of things that people use when they really want to attack you. And then you also have to remember that I understand IT security. Ever since I got engaged with this blockchain, my attack surface is, you know, or not my attack surface, because luckily that's very, very small. But the number of attacks I have to deal with on a weekly basis at least tripled, right? So there's a lot of auxiliary cost to this, and I'm still getting paid a comparatively shit wage for what I could make for, you know, just doing something that's much more chill. So I think it's those things, and I don't see how those things will go away. The problem with the world today is that everybody's looking for somebody else to save them when they should be saving themselves. And as long as people keep looking for somebody else to be their savior, they will keep being disappointed, and they will keep looking around for somebody else to blame for consistently doing the same thing while expecting a different outcome, which is, as you stated, the definition of insanity, right? So I don't know. I think again, this is about maturing. This is about people growing up and taking responsibility for themselves, being a good neighbor, stopping up if they see somebody who's not being a good neighbor and say, hey, dude, get back in your fucking troll den. You know, this is not what we want on our streets. You have a house, you can stay in your property and yell at the world all you want as long as we can't hear you. But when you're in the common area, you just stay in accordance with our constitution or whatever we agree on. And if you don't do that, we're going to penalize you by blacklisting your fucking address, and then you can't use your coins for anything. that will incentivize people to behave, I guarantee you.
Yeah. With I'm sorry, something caught my attention over there. Guys, if you could for me, hit the like button. There's like 53, 54 people here at a time, and there's like 41 likes. So if you could, I mean, it takes 2 seconds, just go and hit that like button. I'd appreciate it. With all these things that go on with you, and let's agree that people are batshit crazy. You still have a hard time understanding why some people don't want to dox?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
And the reason why is because if everybody were doxxed, then people like this would know to go to a real suicide hotline or something like that. They would know who to talk with. They would know who would be qualified to do what based on looking at the profiles. But the fact of the matter is that everybody isn't doxxed. And when they look at the people who are doxxed, often I think Ed and I carry some of the more heavyweight CVs, which means that they're probably inclined to think that we're the smartest people in the room, even though we might not be. So they will naturally probably seek us out in order to get some sort of assistance with whatever problem they have. And when that gets multiplied across a network of users, that becomes a not insignificant amount of noise. There's a reason why Ed is perpetually on do not disturb on Discord, for instance. There's a reason why we're not on Discord servers at all. There's a reason why I have totally cleaned all my followers on Twitter and started aggressively blocking people and so on, because quite frankly, what I'm just looking for right now is just peace of mind, right?
Yeah. Last question for me. I know that you have your own projects and things that you're saying you're looking forward to having some time to actually work on, but I also know that Ed is your boy. If he calls you up and says, Z, I would like you to give me a hand with this AI machine learning thing that I'm doing, are you there?
Oh, I mean, sure. I mean, I think at the end of the day, if Ed has some funding and he wants to do some fun stuff, I would probably be inclined to at least, collaborate on a volunteer part-time basis, because I mean, I enjoy working with Ed, at least when we get to work on technology and not have to worry about drama and organizational stuff and so on, because that's really where, Ed and I, we have a good time together. So yeah, I mean, definitely. I think at the end of the day, what people have to also come to terms with is that there's a long road from the proof of concept that Ed made to actually creating what people already now think it is in their heads. And there might be a world tomorrow where everything changes so radically that what we wanted to do initially might no longer be a concern, right? Like, for instance, the initial focus of the AI project that Ed wanted to do was leveraging GPU power to basically train large data sets, right? But now you have this company in, I think it's in the Middle East somewhere. I think it's called Dolly or something like that, after the cloned sheep. So they are now claiming to have come up with an AI training process that requires almost no data at all. And if that is proven to be true, then all of a sudden the need for high-end GPUs will just go away overnight.
Wow.
All of a sudden you won't have this extensive CPU processing capacity requirement anymore, because now you have a new algorithm for training generalized AIs that might be able to work off condensed abstractions, or what I don't know what they do to work around the learning thing, because at the end of the day, AI is kind of like this weird thing that just has a list of potential outcomes kind of linked together. And then it just kind of narrows down the outcomes based on interactions with you, where it can gauge the sentiment of your reactions, right? So let's say you ask something, and then it presents an answer to you from a list of answers. If you then respond with something negative, it will measure the sentiment on that from a value from 0 being the worst possible sentiment to 1 being a 100% match. And if it's too low, it will go back to the list and find another thing to suggest. And then it will use the process of elimination to derive to the ultimate outcome that you need, or to deduct that it does not know an outcome that satisfies your needs, right? This is what ChatGPT does. And the larger your data set is, the more potential outcomes it can reason about, which is why it can kind of code, but it can't really code anyways, because the problem is that it can reason about what you're asking for, as long as it has sufficient information to reason about it. So let's say I asked ChatGPT to build me a general purpose REST API in Java. It would do that in no time with, close to perfection, simply because the number of examples on the internet is so vast that it has a very high list of things to pick from that it can use in your interactions to derive to the final result it needs to produce, right? But let's say, for instance, you wanted to build something like Cosmos SDK stuff, right? I actually experimented a bit with ChatGPT in the Dojo thing, because I wrote up all the code, but I couldn't be bothered to write all the text. So I basically started feeding the code to ChatGPT, and then I had it explain the code to me, because then I could just take its text and then I could, edit it a bit where I didn't feel it made sense and just post it. And all of a sudden there was well worded, explanations, blah, 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 blah. One of the problems that I found in doing that is that every time ChatGPT touched the Cosmos code, if I were like to ask it to say, okay, can you extend our decorator with a new handler, right? So we want a new decorator and the anti-handler, for instance. And then it would produce some code, but the code would be version 039, but then some of it might be version 042, because the grand sum of information about how to use Cosmos SDK on the internet is fairly limited, because it's such an alpha technology, right? Okay. So ChatGPT cannot produce code that actually works, and the code it produces takes a lot longer to debug, because all of a sudden all the packages are mismatched and so on, right? So there are limits to these things. And the reason why they seem so intelligent is because they can fail at the speed of light. This is what they do really, really well. They just fail at the speed of light. And because they can fail faster than you can think, they can, come to an outcome that is better than what you could get to on your own most of the time, simply because it can try more different things and match it against your sentiment than you would be able to on your own. And this is why AI is a great productivity enabler, but it will never really work unassisted. You have to think of it like a personal assistant, kind of like, have you ever read the Donald Duck comics?
No.
Okay, so there's.
I know who Donald Duck is, but I've never read
in Donald Duck, there's this inventor guy. He's called Geo something, whatever. Okay. He's really smart, and he has this small helper, which is a small automaton that has a light bulb for a head. And then whenever he gets a great idea, it's like its head will start shining, right? But he's kind of like the smart dude and all of that. So it's kind of like that, I guess. But anyways, I have.
Is that where that comes from? The thing about the light bulb going off?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. But listen, I have some other dude calling me as an old Norwegian investor friend. I think he's in town. So
Okay.
I think maybe we should just cut it short because we've been going on for a long time anyways.
That's absolutely fine. However, I do want to at some point later on through DM or whatever, I want to run by you an idea I have for an app, for a phone app. And if you code it for me, I'll market it and we'll make millions of dollars. But I'll tell you all about it some other time.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you so much for doing this. I'll keep it really short so you can get to your buddy. Hopefully we'll do this again. And no, just because Zaradar isn't on the L1 team doesn't mean that we're not going to chit chat with him or see him in the future. So enjoy your day, enjoy, tell your friend I said hi, and I will talk to you soon.
Yeah.
All right,
Take care,
brother.
buddy. Have a
Peace.
good one. Ciao.
All right, everyone who is in the chat and who has been there from the beginning, or whether you just came in or whatever, I really appreciate you. Thank you very much. Hit the like button if you could on the way out. Richie, I saw that you gave out 50 free memberships. My memberships are like 99 cents or something like that for a membership per month. Richie just gave out a whole bunch of them. You gave out 50 of them. I don't even know if there's 50 people in here to accept them, but I really appreciate you and everything that you do. I really love it. Grizzly Bear says, thank you for this open dialogue with Zaradar. He's a quality person and I appreciate all that he did. And I wish you the best of luck in the future. May peace be with him. Absolutely. Trev, thank you for the video. Yeah, it's my pleasure, guys. I'm not able to do this as much as maybe I did over the winter because I will be getting back to work a little more, full time coming up over the next couple of weeks. And then through the summer, I've got some other things going on with work that are going to keep me pretty busy. So if you don't see a lot of me, it doesn't mean I've taken off and absolutely gone. I will be here as much as I can. So when I do pop in, I appreciate you guys jumping in. Danovan, hey, how you doing, buddy? Again, just thank you very much for being here. Thank you for dealing with the ads. I know that kind of pop in kind of in the middle of important things sometimes, but you can go back and kind of listen again if you want to. All right, thanks again for being here. Everybody have a great day, night, afternoon, wherever it is you're in the world. And I'll talk to you all soon. Okay.